That is the first time I've heard a sports sponsorship that is applied to B2B rather than B2C. So that is really eye-opening. What is it that makes events such an important marketing tool? And with the COVID-19 pandemic, what's going to happen to the future of events? But before that, remember to subscribe to my Instagram and YouTube accounts so that you will be able to get more content and also to have notifications when new content comes out. Hello everybody, today it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you a good friend and a great man, and he's none other than Riduwan, and he's the CEO of MUSE Group Asia, Malaysia, and it is a marketing agency specializing in music, MU, sports, S, and entertainment, E, and that's how you get MUSE. And they do a lot of mass participation events in Thailand, Malaysia, and even early days in Singapore. That's how I got to know him anyway. So welcome, Riduwan.
Hi, Rio. How are you? Thank you for inviting me here.
So perhaps, Riduwan, can you tell us a little bit about the kind of projects that MUSE has been up to?
Okay, so just a quick intro. Yes, MUSE is actually short for music, sports, and entertainment. We have spent a lot of our time actually in sports rather than all the other spaces. We have been around for 9 years now. I myself have been in the sports space, including broadcasting, for now over 24 years. In the early days, we spent a lot of our time doing centered around football. No, we don't organize football events, but we do a lot of partnerships, smart partnerships between Southeast Asian brands and football clubs, especially in England and also in Spain. So some of the more notable partnership that we did was with AP Honda Motorcycle, Thailand, with both Manchester United and Liverpool. Apparently, that was the first time ever in their history that the two fierce rivals worked together under a single campaign. We also helped Thai Bev, another Thai company, Thai giant, to associate themselves, partner themselves with Barcelona and Real Madrid. Also a first ever in their history because they are probably more bitter rivals than Man United and Liverpool are. So we spend a lot of time doing football partnership. We brought Liverpool twice to Bangkok, and once we brought Barcelona to play in 2015. So yes, a lot of our early years was centered around Thailand. That's where we originally started most of our business, because we feel that Thailand is a more dynamic market by virtue of the size of the population and also the size of the advertising market. Only 4 years ago, we started venturing into Malaysia. And since then, we have done a number of events in Malaysia. About five years ago, we decided to pivot towards a different space. We understand that as sexy as it was to work with some of the biggest football clubs in the world, and we were lucky to have that privilege, the reality is we don't really own any IP. So we decided to start creating and owning IPs as part of our bigger, larger exit strategy. That was when we ventured into creating mass participation events for ourselves. So right now, almost 5 years later, we have approximately 6-7 events that we own 100%, and a number of international class events where we acquire their licenses and we operate in those markets exclusively. For example, Spartan Race, we did Marvel Run last year. We also own the license to Le Tap by Tour de France, which is an amateur cycling event on the back of the #1 cycling brand in the world, Tour de France. It was an interesting journey. We have seen it grow. A number of our events are now sized at between 15 to 18,000 packs per event. We are happy at that size because we would like to focus more on the experience rather than the volume. And slowly we're going into a little more boutique events like Spartan Race and Le Tap Tour de France. So the journey has been interesting. I think we've grown pretty quickly. I think we are now one of the, if not the biggest mass participation operator in Southeast Asia. We've, I think, almost now 20 events under our belt per year. The only thing is, as we all know, COVID has put a spanner into that plan, for at least for this year. I think we are not unique. Everybody's going through the same challenges. What we need to do is power on and make sure that we come back stronger.
So since you mentioned about COVID-19, I'm sure when it comes to sports and entertainment, it has literally grounded everything to a halt. So what did you do about it, and how are you reacting to it?
A lot of people came to me and asked me, when will the next event be? So the reality is this, the Ministry of Health in Malaysia at least have issued a directive where they said that no mass gatherings are allowed 6 months after the MCO is lifted. So technically, we are still in MCO stage and we are coming to the end of June. So if anything, I think our first event is safe to say it will be next year. This applies to Thailand as well. So in Malaysia alone, we were projecting at the start of the year a very busy year ahead in 2020. We slated 13 events, big events this year. And right now, if we are honest with ourselves, I think we're staring at zero. No events this year. So, of course, this puts a lot of challenges in what we do as a company. But the MCO period also allowed us to review how we do things and also how do we come back stronger. Interestingly, MUSE is not an events company per se. We are a marketing company, like you rightly said. We use sports as a marketing tool. But that doesn't mean that we only do events. No, a lot of our business is actually centered around consulting clients on how they can use sports as a marketing tool. So, for instance, one of our long clients is Proton in Malaysia. Proton has been a title sponsor for one of our runs. It's the biggest half marathon in Malaysia, the Proton HSN 21. And we put together a marketing strategy where we help Proton sell cars to our runners. So it was interesting. Last year, we actually helped Proton sell 170 cars just from our runner base. That translates to almost 10 million in sales. So if you apply the right strategy, sports actually is a very powerful tool to push sales, right? To get real returns, ROI from what you do. But what we are doing now is we are reviewing the business that we do. While we did a number of events, or we plan to do a number of events this year, obviously we now have to look at moving what we do outside the physical space. What else can we do that doesn't require us putting 18,000 people in one space? So there's some interesting conversation that we are having. We are consulting one of the states in Malaysia to become their sports consultant. They're putting together a sports agenda for the next 10 years. And we are happy to be part of that exercise. I'm not privy to share a lot of the details with you as yet, but a lot of the plans that they have to make that state the sporting state of Malaysia, very, very exciting, never seen before, requires both local and international participation. So we are very lucky to be part of that conversation. We are also in discussion to create our own sports apparel brand. 6 months ago, I don't think it was ever in our radar to co-own a sports apparel brand. But again, COVID, the pandemic, and the stay at home gave us a lot of time to sit down and actually study the opportunity. And it's quite interesting, actually. So we're pursuing that. It allows now the company to stay in the sports space, but venture into the many different branches that's available to us.
So like you have rightly mentioned, music, sports, or entertainment, these are just the topic, so to speak, that brings people together. right? And the way you can make use of it to branch out into various applications will make you a lot more flexible in terms of facing the challenges that COVID-19 poses. On that note, perhaps can you tell us a little bit about why sports and entertainment is one of the highest grossing sponsorship genres in marketing? What makes it so attractive to use sports and entertainment and even music?
I think the appeal to sports entertainment in general, to me, this is my personal opinion, is sports and entertainment gives us an outlet away from everyday life for that short moment in time, whether it's a 2-hour football game or a 2-hour concert. We forget about the world and we just focus on what's in front of us. So it's a form of escapism, but at the same time, the drama, especially around sports, give that stability and uncertainty at the same time. And that drives us as humans. You need a little bit of certainty and you need a little bit of unknown that makes life a little bit more interesting. So I think this is partly why it's appealing. Traditionally, I think, especially Asia, we like our sports and it's growing in popularity, largely because we have a very young or a younger population base. So I think that trend will continue in the foreseeable future. But more importantly, fans came from the word fanatics, right? Especially sporting supporters. They remain true and loyal to whatever sides and clubs they support. And because of that, they tend to support whoever that supports those clubs and association. And this is why it's a good symbiotic relationship between sponsors and fans if the application is done right. I gave you the example of Proton. If the application is done right, it can be a lucrative partnership for all.
So you brought a very interesting point, and that is the fact that both music, sports, or even to some extent entertainment in general, the key attraction a lot of times is the fact that it can garner a lot of fans, and these are fanatic fans. Can you identify what is the formula? I mean, if a brand wants to now cultivate their own fans, is it possible, or is it only limited to the genres of music, sports?
In today's setting, right, relevance is the key to creating following, right? A lot of people are trapped in this notion that my brand needs to look cool, my brand needs to look fresh, my brand needs to blah, 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 which is fine, no issue. I think it's important. But what is important at the end of the day to me is that brand must be relevant to somebody for that person to adopt the brand. I give you a very simple example. Spartan Race, it is the number one obstacle course racing brand in the world. You have over 1 million racers on an annual basis who participate in Spartan races across 42 countries, if I'm not wrong today. If you think about OCR, and we've gone through our national service, it's basically almost a military obstacle course, right? Why would you pay good money to go through all that pain? For an average person, it makes no sense. And yet, for a lot of us, for me especially, it is an outlet where you could relieve the younger you, where you run around out there with no cares in the world. And it's fun. Yes, of course, you don't think it's as fun a day later because your whole body will be aching. But at that moment of time, you forget about everything around you. You forget about your age. I saw in Sarawak, probably the toughest course that we've created. A couple, 75 years old, doing a Spartan race. And I have complete respect for that couple. Amazing. They are not bent on breaking any records for sure, but they are out there enjoying themselves. So you have people who embrace this lifestyle. You have people who actually tattoo the Spartan logo on their bodies because that sport becomes very relevant to them. It becomes something that they embrace. So I think for any brand, relevance is important. You can have the coolest font, the coolest products and what have you. If it's it's not relevant to the end user, it means nothing to us. So I think the first thing we need to do is to create relevance. And when you do that, then you will have a very powerful brand, a brand that everybody wants to be associated with.
Another good point that you brought up just now was the fact that sports especially has the drama inside it, right? And I think that is very useful for brands if they want to create that relevance, because you can't be perfect all the time to people. It is simply too detached, right? You need to be real. And if it has to be real, it means that there is some sort of a drama involved at times. And we have seen brands like Red Bull, for example, moving into the sports and extreme sports, especially space, and created drama of their own. So would you say that this is possibly a trend where brands will begin to move into this space as well and do things on their own?
I think before any brand decides that they want to be part of the drama, they have to understand the downside of such drama. It means that you as a brand, you don't have complete control over the outcome of anything. You need to accept that as a reality. Like you mentioned, Red Bull, for instance, they go into extreme sports, and that fits the product that they're trying to push. But at the same time, extreme sports will mean that people will get injured. Perhaps somebody might die. Are you as a brand prepared to embrace that, accept that as part of going into that space? It's very important to understand what you are getting yourself into. Does that fit into the brand position, the corporate culture that you have? There are companies that are very conservative, and we respect that. It's just the nature of the business, right? Are they prepared to go into that space? So not every product is relevant for every client. The drama is sometimes so memorable that it's etched in your psyche. If, for instance, you ask any Liverpool fan, they will remember the Champions League game against Barcelona. That is something that will be etched in their psyche for the rest of their lives. And any brand that's prominent enough around that memory will be remembered. So this is why, again, when you create those drama, you must accept that you have no full control, but you can be part of the script, and you must be fast enough, nimble enough to embed yourself when the opportunity arises. Because, like I said, the script is ever evolving. And when it happens, what do? You must be able to go through all the different scenarios. And if this happens, this is what we do. If this happens, this is what we do. You must be able to plan yourself so far forward that you are able to react at every instance.
Does that mean that sports sponsorship or partnership with sports is limited to only the big boys, the big brands? What if I'm a small, medium enterprise that is a little bit lesser known? Is there still room for me to take part in sports or use sports as a marketing tool?
Of course, there is, right? Again, it requires smart planning. But first, I think what marketers need to understand is this. Your involvement in any sponsorship doesn't stop at sponsoring a product. Behind every dollar of sponsorship that you put forward, you must activate. And the rule of thumb is anywhere between 2 to 3 times of what you spend on sponsorship. Because if you put all your money towards sponsorship with very little left towards activation, then there's very little you can do around that sponsorship. So the net tangible benefits is limited beyond your association with that sponsorship. Any companies, big or small, need to be cognizant of that fact. As part of their planning process, they must be mindful that they need to set aside monies towards sponsorship and activating. We have worked with brands big and small, and if we have the right resources available to us, you could see tangible results almost immediately. There was a very interesting story. Imagine this, one of our sponsors for Liverpool Football Club, and this was a few years ago, in Thailand was actually a car battery company, a local car battery company. Okay. You ask yourself, why would they associate themselves with a club like Liverpool? You don't see the direct connections between the two. Because if you ask me or you ask anybody around you, what car battery brand do you have in your car? Most of us can't tell. If, for instance, your car battery dies on you, you call the workshop and tell them to get it fixed. You don't even know what brand battery they put in your car. So here lies the opportunity. Who decides on what battery goes into your car? It's the mechanics. It's not you. If this partnership, you are able to incentivize the mechanics to use that particular brand more than others, then voila, that partnership just happens. So how many mechanics would love to watch a football game in the UK with Liverpool? I would think quite a lot. And if you incentivize them right, then they will prefer your brand over others. Any sponsorship, you have to understand the target market. You have to understand the psychology of the end users before you come up with a concrete plan. That's why I said if you have the right application, it makes sense.
That is the first time I've heard a sports sponsorship that is applied to B2B rather than B2C. So that is really eye-opening for me. And I think you are very right to say that if you strategize it properly, if you know exactly who you're talking to, you know how to leverage on it. And the important thing is the sponsorship for the event is only the start. It's only what creates the noise. What you do with all the hype is the most important, right? That's where you can reap the benefits. So that's a very good insight. Thanks for that. But with COVID-19 and everybody is talking about pivoting to digital and all that, is there something similar for sports and music entertainment? And how would that change the way brands should look at sports and entertainment events moving forward?
During COVID, and we've seen this across multiple sports, everybody was scrambling towards doing things virtual. And I completely get that because you need continuity in terms of your brand, despite people not being able to go out. And we can expect that to continue until end of the year, right? Although in some cases, we have seen races will start as early as August. The question would be, is this a fad or a trend? Is this going to change things down the line? Or is this just a reaction to survive, both as a business and as a brand? My personal take is this. A lot of events have moved towards the digital space in the form of virtual events. But for me, it is just a reaction towards surviving. And also, it's just a fad. Will this continue beyond next year? Unlikely. Again, this is my personal thoughts. Why? Simply because you have to understand why people participate in, for instance, mass participation events to start with. In Asia, my conclusion is, for most of us, it is a social gathering rather than a sporting gathering. Okay, a lot of people take part in big marathon events because they want to tell the world, I was here, I took part in the event. Here, look at my medal, and they put it on social media. You might be running a 5 km, but you will tell the world that I was at a marathon, right? Conveniently omitting the fact that you only ran 5 km. But that's besides the point. But it's a social gathering. We are, especially as Asians, we are social creatures. And this is why camera apps is super popular in Asia. Virtual events done in the confine of your homes does not offer you that social inclusiveness. And because of that, it will reach a point where people say, okay, I'll do this when I'm stuck at home. But now that I can go out, I want to go out there. I want to be with my friends and I want to take pictures and I want to put it on social media. And because of that, I think physical events, when they are allowed to come back, will see a resurgence. Because as much as digital events are interesting, again, my personal take, how interesting is it to cycle on a static bicycle looking at a screen, pretending that you're cycling on a Tour de France route? with no wind in your hair, you can't smell the fresh air, you are not cycling next to your friends, you don't get the opportunity to put on the latest cycling jerseys. How fun is that? So this is why I think the move towards digital, while it will happen over time, but it will not take away the need to have physical events.
I think you have some very good points there. First thing to me would be, if digital is trying to replace the real experience, they will definitely fail, because you are just playing second fiddle. You are just trying to be an alternative, so to speak. But if they can create their own experiences, perhaps even like esports, for example, they are able to create their own experiences. But even then, the biggest gathering is a physical gathering for esports. The finals, they come together to compete against one another, right? So perhaps it's the wrong question to ask. Perhaps we should be thinking of how digital and physical can work in tandem and work together, right? And with this COVID situation that created the awareness of digital, maybe there are new ways for us to look at the engagement. Like we could look at digital engagement on a smaller scale, perhaps, and then before drumming up the demand to move everybody onto the physical space. Would you think that that is a possible approach?
I think digital will have a increasing role to play in physical events, regardless what events it is. And I think part of that evolution will be enabled by advancement in technology like 5G. I give you an example. So in the past, when you take part in a run event, a marathon, for instance, what normally happens is the event organizer will take a photograph of you at the finish line and then give you the option to buy those photographs of them, right? So it becomes a revenue stream for the event organizer. You, in return, gets a nice frame picture of you at the event. While that worked in the past, and we're talking about the recent past, these days, and only recently, as recent as actually last year, we at MUSE, we adopted a new technology where if you give us access to your social media, we will take pictures of you throughout the route and we will put it up on your social media almost instantaneously. So technology has allowed us to do that. Right now, if you look at China, and their adoption of technology is so far ahead than the rest of the world. In certain races in China, they actually use facial recognition technology where they could actually take a picture of you in a mass of crowd. And that picture can be sent to you on social media. I think what will differentiate one event to another is the user experience. And this is why, as event organizers, we constantly look at how to improve the user experience. And that's in part to do with the engagement we have with sponsors. If sponsors embrace what we offer and support us as such, then we could offer more to the end users. And that helps propel branding and ROI for these sponsors. So it's an ecosystem that you need to create. What can 5G do for sporting events? The sky is the limit. It's like, what can you do within the resources that you have? But if you can crack that nut and you find that magic formula, then you set yourself apart than the rest of the event organizers. And that's critical to survival, to building your brand.
And I think digital definitely helps to lengthen the engagement even
Correct.
before and after, right?
Exactly.
For the mere fact, like what you mentioned, that they are able to track the individuals. So you can actually lengthen the engagement with the individual in a very customized way, like
Correct.
providing them with their own special picture and so on. I think it should be able to create an even more engaging or even more in-depth kind of a relationship between brands and the participants if used correctly.
Correct.
And I think 5G definitely will open up a lot more possibilities.
That's right.
With this COVID slowly returning to normal, slowly, cautiously opening up, even though, like what you mentioned, the earliest for events to take place will likely be next year. What's your next steps?
I think in part, we have to prepare ourselves for a number of possibilities. While we say that events might come back next year, and we pray it does, how will that look like? We also need to prepare ourselves with the possibility of new SOPs put in place for events. So if you have, whether it's 3,000, 15,000 people, how do you process these people safely? Because we need to be able to provide a safe events ground for our participants. The last thing we want is that to turn into a super cluster. So it's those things that we need from an operational point of view, we need to review. From a business point of view, we need to see whether, like I mentioned, do we move the business to give a more balanced spectrum, business activities that don't rely on physical gatherings of large number of people, right? So like, for instance, the apparel brand business that we talked about, consultancy, for instance, we have to review what we do as a business, because when you move to spaces where you have not been into, it requires a rejig in the resources that you have. It requires bringing in resources that you don't have. It requires a little bit of soul searching, and how do we do this with the challenges that we are facing at the same time? So that's the hard reality. But like I said, it's in a way interesting times. So those people who are creative, those people who are very flexible in how they want to move forward, I think will survive. And people who are still stuck in the notion that certain things must be done in certain manners, I think they will have a harder time adapting to the new norm.
Well, thanks for sharing today, Riduwan. And I think even for me personally, I've learned a lot about the event sponsorship and so on. If brands and marketers want to connect with you and to learn more from you, how can they find you?
You can go to our website, or you can email me. Our website is www.musegroup.asia. Or you can email me at Riduwan, Riduwan, @musegroup.asia. I'm very happy to speak to anybody, because I think a lot of people perhaps don't fully appreciate what especially sports can do for their brand. It's very exciting, it's very dynamic, simply because of the drama that it offers. You know, and like I said, you know, everybody likes a little bit of drama in their life, and because of that, if you apply the basic marketing principles in the right fashion for something like sports, you could see handsome returns.
Thank you very much, Riduwan. And I hope we'll catch up again when the COVID is over and we can do so physically.
My pleasure. Rio, stay safe, stay happy always.
The key takeaways.
Music, sports, and entertainment are powerful in creating fans because of the drama they can produce. Brands can then leverage on this to add drama to their own brand stories. The key consideration is relevance, and brands should not look at the events as the be-all and end-all. It is only the tool to create the noise. And relevance is cemented only through engagement prior and post to the event. Like what Riduwan shared, activation is what drives the end results. Digital and physical events should not be seen as either-or options. Digital is powerful in engagement and customized experience. Marrying this strength with the power of events to create fans and physical social interaction, we can have marketing strategies to win hearts, plant ideas, and inspire actions.